we have to talk about Indiana Hoosiers football. Imagine that sentence being said out loud just 3 years ago. People would have turned off the video. They'd have been like, what the hell is there to talk about? This ain't Indiana basketball, not Bob Knight, not Assembly Hall. Indiana fans, they just kicked down the door. They didn't let us folks in the media have any time to adjust. Them and their 5 billion alumni get on our asses anytime we try to temper expectations. They're acting like new money. And you know new money. New money buys the loud car before it buys the house. That is Indiana football right now. And you know what? They earned it. I ain't even gonna lie. Indiana fans, they are disconnected from reality, but their team has absolutely earned them the right to be disconnected from reality. When your program goes from college football witness protection in the most losingest program to national champion, you don't have to be humble immediately. But here's the warning. The same rules still apply to Indiana that still apply to everybody else. You still have to block Ohio State. You still have to tackle Michigan. You still have to cover USC's receivers in space. You still have to go on the road to Seattle and Eugene. You still have to wake up the week after a big win and act like Northwestern can ruin your life if you play sloppy. And that's where the new money gets humble, because old money programs, they know the tax bill always comes due. Alabama knows. Ohio State knows. Oregon, if they didn't already know, they learned it from Indiana last year. And USC has learned it the hard way about 12 different times for about 20 years straight. The sport doesn't care that your story is cute. The sport does not care that your fans bought championship merch and started tweeting like SEC message board moderators. The sport asks you one question every single Saturday. Can you do it again? And honestly, Indiana fans, they should be unrealistic. They should look at a 10-win projection and say, that's it. Well, especially with that raggedy non-conference. That's a whole nother story. Because for once, Indiana football, it gave them permission. Curt Cignetti dragged that fan base out of the basement and handed them a national championship and then told them to stop apologizing for wanting more. So yes, Hoosier fans, you are absolutely new money. But buddy, the check cleared. And now we find out whether they can build wealth or whether they just bought the whole bar one round and forgot that the mortgage is due. Curt Cignetti, he did not walk into Bloomington asking people to believe in fairy tales. He walked in asking people to believe that you could stick to a recipe, you can cook, and now Indiana's cooking. At his introductory press conference, Curt Cignetti said, Purdue sucks, so does Michigan and Ohio State. And then he dropped the line that became prophecy. I win. Google me. And that sounded arrogant when it was said. Now it sounds like a man reading his resume out loud. In 15 seasons as a head coach, Curt Cignetti has never had a losing record, not even one single solitary time. And he explained it perfectly. If you want to be good in anything at life, you got to have a goal, and then you got to be committed to it. And then you have the discipline to stay in it day in and day out and work towards your goal. You need the work ethic and the mental toughness to persevere. And that, in a nutshell, is the foundation of Indiana's rise. It ain't the portal, it ain't NIL, and it ain't a quarterback, because it's discipline in the portal, discipline in NIL, discipline when you're looking for your next quarterback. And Cignetti's version of discipline is not don't jump off sides. It's deeper than that. In coaching, you get what you demand. And if you're not coaching it, you're allowing it to happen. That's what Coach Cignetti says. And you notice we're not talking about Indiana's history, because outside of this last season or the last two, there's nothing really to talk about outside of, Nolan Harrison and Antoine Randall L. and George Taliaferro, or Michael Penix leaving and going to Washington when you see old highlights of him. That's pretty much it. Because for years, Indiana football had a ceiling because the expectations were the ceiling. And the whole fan base, they wanted competitive. The administration, they wanted respectable. Like the national media wanted a cute underdog story, like when Michael Penix Jr. helped them upset Ohio State. Cignetti, on the other hand, he didn't want any of that. He wanted a monster. And he built Indiana like a man who understood the modern sport. First, he bought his own proof. Like when he came from James Madison, he brought players who already knew what his standards felt like. And CBS Sports, they reported that his first Indiana signing class included 13 players from James Madison, with dudes like Aiden Fisher, D'Angelo Pons, Elijah Surratt, Mara, that they became foundational pieces to what they were building. That was stage one. Bring the culture with you. Stage two was the 2025 roster rebuild. And that was when Indiana stopped hoping and started hunting. Fernando Mendoza came in from Cal, and he became the kind of quarterback who changes what your offense can be. Think about when Cignetti talked about Mendoza. He talked about his arm talent and the fit at Indiana, and that Indiana beat out bigger brand names because the program had a plan and not a sales pitch. And then they added veteran pieces around him. Offensive line help, skill talent, defensive depth, and the kind of grown man roster construction that doesn't just care what your recruiting ranking was when you were 17. It only cares whether you can help them win right now on Saturdays, and are you developed? Because this is where the transfer portal conversation, where it really honestly needs to mature. Because people keep saying that the portal is ruining college football. No, not at all. The portal is exposing which coaches actually know what they're looking at. Because Cignetti last season, dude had a list. He had a demand. He had discipline. And Indiana won the national championship. Now, here's where things get really interesting for the Indiana Hoosiers. Because a lot of programs, they reach the mountaintop and then they immediately start acting like they found a golden ticket. After winning the national championship, Cignetti, he didn't even sound shocked. He actually said that college football now requires a team, quote, ready to compete for championships every single year. Now, Cignetti, he don't speak in Cinderella languages. He talks like an emperor. And Indiana's 2026 roster build saw plenty of talent. You had Josh Hoover transfer in from TCU, Nick Marsh from Michigan State, Joe Brunner from Wisconsin, Toby Usamsamni from Kansas State. 247 Sports reported that Marsh, Brunner, Toby, that they all finished inside of the top 100 of transfer rankings. Now look at Josh Hoover specifically. He's the biggest name because replacing a championship quarterback is never easy. And he doesn't need to be Fernando Mendoza because that's the actual trap. He needs to be the best version of Josh Hoover inside of Cignetti's offense. And he needs to learn not to get shook up on the road because that's where he's been shaky and often below average. People want to compare him to Fernando Mendoza, but Fernando Mendoza's interception percentage at Cal was the exact same as it was at Indiana versus Josh Hoover, even though he was playing in an air raid offense. His interception percentage was like 3 times as high. So that's something that absolutely has to change. Then you got Nick Marsh. He has to become a difference maker on the outside, not in a couple games, but immediately. Then you look at Joe Brunner. Like he has to help the offensive line stay physical enough to survive Ohio State, Michigan, USC, and Washington. Then you got Toby Osamsamni, who gives them an edge pressure in the Big Ten. This ain't a 7-on-7 league. Then they bring in Turbo Richardson, Preston Zachman, Joshua Burnham, and the rest of the portal class just to prove that Indiana just did not buy names. They bought what they believe are fits. Because Cignetti's discipline, quotes, discipline on the field is getting 11 guys to do their job. Because when you got 11 guys that do their job consistently, play in and play out, it's not addition, it's multiplication. And if we're being honest, that's football gospel. But that's the biggest question about Indiana in 2026. When Cignetti brought those guys over his first year at Indiana, they developed for 2 years and then they were able to win a national championship after adding Mendoza. So is this another 2-year thing or can they win the championship in 2026? That's the question. Championships are multiplication. 11 guys doing their job. And that's why Indiana's defense became such a problem. And that's why defensive coordinator Bryant Haynes had every right to get spicy after the Alabama game. Because after Indiana took Alabama behind the woodshed, 38-3 in the Rose Bowl, Alabama quarterback Ty Simpson said that Indiana's defense, it wasn't overly complicated and that Alabama knew what was coming, but Indiana was always in the right place. Haynes then responded on social media by claiming, that's adorable, and then told Alabama fans to grow up after they got mad. I actually think that Simpson was giving Indiana a compliment and not trying to diss them. But I also understand why Haynes took it as disrespect. Because when you watch Indiana on defense, yes, they do simulated blitzes and everything, but they run very basic stuff. but they run it to perfection last year. Indiana has to prove that discipline travels into 2026. And what better way to jumpstart than manufacturing some bulletin board material so your players don't just start assuming success produces itself? Because Fox Sports, they listed Indiana as the top contenders to win in 2026 in terms of the Big Ten, with the odds right behind Ohio State and in the same conversation as Oregon. Covers listed Indiana with a regular season win total of 10.5. But part of that is because preseason schedule, which I have to say, when Curt Cignetti changed the schedule and he was like, we're going to the SEC model, I wasn't mad at it. And mind you, I shamed him for that point in time because he knows Indiana was going to be so good and what he was building. Us college football fans, we deserve more games. So I am not going to let him off the hook. Indiana's regular season win total of 10.5. That's tied with Miami, Oregon, Texas Tech. Indiana football has reached a point where 10 wins actually might feel disappointing. And yes, Indiana's scheduled like a program betting itself to hit the over, because this 2026 schedule starts with North Texas, Howard, and Western Kentucky, all at home. Then Northwestern comes to Bloomington before the Hoosiers get into the heavy Big Ten stretch. But Indiana's official schedule, it includes Ohio State at home, Michigan on the road, USC at home, Washington on the road, and Purdue at home. I absolutely hate this with the power of 1,000 suns. I do, this non-conference schedule. But at least Curt Cignetti admits that it's part of his strategy. Indiana trains like a prize fighter, fighting against some unqualified sparring partners before you turn those habits loose on the conference opponents. And it is true that you do not get extra credit for making your life harder when the Big Ten already put Ohio State, Michigan, USC, and Washington on your plate. But the fans deserve it. And right now, the target, it is on Indiana. Ohio State ain't coming to Bloomington for a celebration tour. Michigan, they ain't letting Indiana walk into Ann Arbor and act like that the Big Ten belongs to Bloomington now. USC, they bring in big-time athletes. They might not bring no defense, but they bring in that. Purdue, they would absolutely throw a parade for ruining Indiana's season, even if they finish 3-9. Curt Cignetti said it himself. The challenge is not to only play in its entirety. It's to play all the plays, and it's not being affected by the success or being affected by the failure. Never be satisfied. And that's the 2026 Indiana season, right? Can they be unaffected by success? Can they win while everybody has spent 8 months telling them how special that they are? Can Josh Hoover, can he lead without trying to be Fernando Mendoza? Can Nick Marsh become wide receiver 1? Can Brunner, can he stabilize with Carter, the offensive line, and be one of the best in the nation? Can Osunsanmi and Burham, can they keep that defense not only strong and physical, but violent? Because Indiana, they are not the underdog anymore. They ain't a feel-good story. They ain't going to sneak up on anybody. Curt Cignetti wanted Indiana to stop thinking like Indiana. Mission accomplished. Now the question is whether Indiana can handle the role of defending national champion. Because it's one thing to say, Google me, and it's another thing when everybody already has Googled you. Because I got a saying, you do it once, it's an accident. You do it twice, you can really do it. Make sure that you guys like, share, subscribe, get notifications, hop in them comments. Am I right about Indiana? And go check out the other videos about Notre Dame, about Clemson, about Texas, and all the other schools that we've done and the college football news. I'm George Wrighster. Peace out. Catch you guys later.